Welcome to the Alcohol Addiction Podcast. I'm, of course, your host, Lee Davey, and today I'm joined by my special guest, Gary John Bishop. How's life, Gary?
Quite outstanding. Just great. I mean, it couldn't be any better, really.
I got to say, Gary, okay, there's a lot of women going to be listening to this who are going to be quite hot under the collar listening to your accent. I've had a lot of feedback about the Celtic accents, and they love it.
Yeah. Mine's is a little screwed up, I'm afraid. So I'm kind of like, I'm caught somewhere between Train Spotting and Gone with the Wind.
I can hear it. I can hear that little twang.
Right goes in and out. I mean, you have to. I've been here for 20 years, so you have to adjust it a little if you want to get through the drive-through at McDonald's.
Never thought about going back home to that cold, beautiful country of yours?
I actually love Scotland. I just love it. I just have, all my family's there. I just, this is the place where I seem to have kind of done my thing and struck the right chord. So here I am.
Well, I read your book, Unfuck Your Life, Get Out of Your Head and Into Your Life.
Yeah.
I had to say unfuck because I don't know how to say it with the little asterisks in the middle.
What is fuck? It's unfuck yourself. That is, and it's deliberately in your face. It's kind of like my style, I belong in the self-help category, which to me is there's a lot of foo-foo in it. There's a lot of bullshit in it. There's a lot of pop science. And my background is more, I'm more like what you would call an ontologist. So my particular field of interest is ontology, which is the study of being. Mm-hmm. So you're a human being, certainly look like one. Mm-hmm. You're a human being. You're always being some way.
Yeah.
So there's always some definitive way of being that you're being in a moment of time. Mm-hmm. If you actually watch a person, you'll see that their ways of being are pretty limited. They're pretty defined. Most people would call that their persona or something, but it's not. It's actually this kind of track of ways of being. So whenever I do work with somebody, I'm looking at the ways that they be in life and how they be. So one of the ways that I would suspect you be in life is I think you're pretty analytical. So I think if you're being analytical, you tend to find the logic in things. You tend to want to work it out in your head. It's kind of like a default way that you be. Now, that's great being analytical, right? I mean, there's a lot of strength in being something like analytical, but there's a downside to it.
I know that. My wife tells me that.
All right. So, right. Very good. So it does frustrate other people. So you see things that other people aren't seeing. You pick up on things that other people aren't picking up on. You get caught up in the details sometimes. But it's also, as a way of being, it's very internal. Right? So, excuse me a second here.
Okay.
So it's a very internal way of being. You have to kind of go in the way.
Yeah.
So you find there's a lot of introspection. There's a lot of... and then over time you build up this kind of concern. So you end up with like this rolling body of concerns that you're engaging internally, which can be problematic, right? Because then you might find yourself being someone who, when life's not going your way, you might pull in and disconnect because you need to work it out for yourself. You weren't born doing that shit.
No.
You turned out that way. Right? Now, everybody's got their own ways of kind of default ways of being. But when you actually start to examine somebody or certainly start to understand someone, if you understand them ontologically, you can actually see what they would do in a certain situation really predictably. You can actually reach right back into the background of somebody's life. And you can see why they do what they do. You can totally see their logic and why that's. I mean, look, in the cold light of day, we all do shit that when you think about it, you're like, why did I do that?
Yeah.
Right. But if you knew your own ontology, you would see it. You would know totally why you did it and why you keep doing it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And why is that important?
Well, it's important because. If you want to, when you were born like this kind of potential, and you were a potential. Now you've become Lee Davy, right? Which ain't bad, right? I mean, that's a pretty good thing. But there's a limited range of potential in it. So there's a limited way that you can be. When you were a kid, that was unlimited.
Yeah.
You were free to be. The older you get, the more you notice the constraint of it. Like, you're more constrained to be the you that you've become. It's important to understand that, because your true potential, I'm saying this in quotes, lies outside of the ways that you currently be. You need to get beyond, like, the limits of your own persona, would be another way to say it. If you want to produce out of the box or out of the usual kind of results that you do in life. Does that make sense?
Well, let me test that. So, well, let me ask you a question first that will lead on to my answer to that. I've got a 6-month-old daughter. She's actually outside. Right. She's actually outside right now having an Easter party, so we can hear screaming kids. That's what it is.
Awesome.
And I look at her, Gary, thinking about that potential. And,
right.
And how lucky she is to have two parents who are really going to allow her to, as best they know and as best as they can, to like grow up in the right way.
Yeah.
Do you believe we all, apart from obvious physical abnormalities and serious brain defects, are we all born of the same software and hardware? So we all have the same opportunities or abilities to be whatever we want.
I totally get it. All right, so there's a thing, Aristotle first came out with this, and then there was an English philosopher. There's a phrase you never thought you'd hear. Anyway, so there's an English philosopher, a guy by the name of John Locke from the 1700s. They came up with this phrase called tabula rasa, which is a Latin phrase. It means blank tablet. And what they proposed was that you are born a blank tablet, right? Neuroscience has got certain issues with that, completely understandably, because you are genetically predisposed for some things, right? But if you can set that aside, if you say, okay, I'm genetically predisposed for some things, but those things aren't definitive, like it'll go that way. It just means the likelihood of it going that way is a little higher with me, right? However, for all intents and purposes, my approach as an ontologist would be, yeah, you're born a blank tablet. Now, that blank tablet in about the first 25 years of your life gets marked. It gets etched upon, right? And this is a little abstract right now, but it'll make sense in a minute. So it gets etched upon with what? With fundamental conclusions that you come to as a human being. And it's in 3 areas. You come to a small group of personal conclusions. They get etched on the tablet. Then there's a small group of social conclusions. That is what I've concluded about others. And then there's a small group of what I would call life conclusions. That is what I've concluded about life itself. So I've made these conclusions in 3 areas: conclusions about myself, conclusions about others, conclusions about life. Those are etched on that tablet. You are still replaying those conclusions in your adult life that you started when you were a kid. In the process of aging, what are those conclusions designed to do? They're designed to give you some kind of certainty about what life is and isn't. It's like how you now see life. You now see life from your own set of conclusions. So what are some examples of conclusions? Well, they're never good, right? It's never like, I've concluded that I'm freaking awesome. It's never that. It's never that. And people that tell you, no, I really am awesome, they're bullshitting. They're saying that to overcome what's really there. That's what they say to overcome it, to transcend it. If you ask someone in the cold light of day, what is it that really goes on with you? and they allow themselves the time to kind of be with it, they'll actually be able to tell you, like, well, I relate to myself like I'm not smart enough. Or I think that life's a struggle. Or I don't think you can trust people. And those conclusions on that blank tablet play out over and over and over and over and over. And so you see them in everything that you do.
Mm-hmm.
They're in everything. You picked your partner based on what you concluded.
I was going to ask you, does the etchings on the tablet also manifest itself in the people that you surround yourself with? Do you look at your partner and almost like project your tablet onto them?
Absolutely, you'll do. In fact, even people who are in really shitty relationships, it's not a mistake that you picked them. You picked them based on what you concluded. Now, so if you can get all of that, like just as one thing, so I started out as a blank tablet, I came to these fundamental conclusions, but how come I have the personality or the persona I have? Your persona transcends and overcomes what you concluded. So then your life becomes this cycle. You ever hear people saying terms like, I self-sabotage? You ever heard people say that? Right, that's deliberate. So you'll undercut yourself to then save yourself with your own persona. So for instance, let's say, I'm going to use an example here, but if one of the things you've concluded is that I'm unloved, I'm not loved, right? And you got to get your conclusions are based on what you saw, but what you saw and what you interacted with as a kid, you were the one that concluded that. It wasn't done to you.
Well,
you concluded it in a moment of time.
I can give you an example, Gary, actually, which we can unpack, and it might lead somewhere. I've just come from Cardiff City Centre where I interviewed somebody. And when I come back, my wife said, how did the interview go? And I said, it didn't really go that well. And she said, why? And I said, I never really seem to get on with really purely intellectual, smart people. I don't know how to connect, and therefore I don't know how to conduct an interview. Now that is a story. It's a self-sabotage story that I've created, and I know.
Right.
So let's talk about that.
Right. So then, the reason why you don't connect with people in that kind of example, when you first meet people, you're determining whether they're an intellectual threat to you or not. So you're immediately internal. Mm-hmm. The nature of that, like I'm with you and I'm kind of judging you, like, how is this guy? Oh, he sounds smart. I'm no longer with you. I'm in my head about you. I'm now talking to myself. So the nature of that itself is one of being disconnected.
Yeah, it breaks the connection. I can see that quite clearly now you said that.
Totally like go and meet people. You're in this constant state of judgment, like, are they smarter than me? Now, I would assert that in there with you, there is some conclusion like, I'm not smart enough. Mm-hmm. And if you follow your life path, you'll see yourself manipulating your environment to avoid it. So you'll avoid you're not being smart enough getting exposed. You don't want people to see it.
Right. So a good example of that is being in school and fucking about and getting into trouble and suspended and expelled. Right. So you can be a cool kid, so you avoid having to expose yourself as an intellectual fraud.
All right. So now we're getting to one of the things that you do to overcome the conclusion. What you use is charisma.
Yeah, I taught my way out.
Right, so you'll be charismatic to overcome the conclusion that you're not smart enough. You would never say to somebody, oh yeah, I don't think I'm smart enough. No one's walking around saying that shit. People are self-deprecating, they'll kind of play on it, but it's all hidden, right? The philosopher, well, he's a philosopher and he was a forefather of psychology. Carl Gustav Jung, he he'd say you wear a social mask. So your persona is designed to overcome what you've concluded. And then here's the shitty part. Your persona also provides evidence for what you've concluded so that your persona can keep going. Mm-hmm. So you end up, as an adult, you're in this cycle of proving what you concluded and then using your persona or your personality to overcome it. But the overcoming of it is temporary. Why? Because you need to find evidence for the conclusion again to provide evidence for the usefulness of your own persona. So as I like to say it, as an adult, you're caught in this cycle of fucking yourself to save yourself. Mm-hmm. And you're doing it in little ways and really big ways. You're doing it in subtle ways. You're doing it in profound ways. But you're always in this cycle of like down, up, down, up, down, up. Like someone with your kind of persona and with that conclusion, you'll have these times where you're really questioning your viability. Like, what am I doing? I mean, I'm out my depth. This is too, you know, it'll be very self-deprecating. One of the things that I give to my clients is I say to them, that bullshit, that kind of, those conclusions, they're not real. You made them up. They're not real. And they're not even you. How do I know they're not me? Because if it was up to you, you would have them be something better than that shit. You wouldn't be saying to yourself, I'm not smart enough, or I'm not loved, or I don't belong, or I'm incapable, or I don't fit in, or I'm different. You wouldn't be saying that shit to yourself. You'd be saying, I'm awesome. I belong. I'm part of this. I'm intelligent. You're not saying that. Now, if you kind of get everything that I'm saying is some kind of basic mechanism. So there's a mechanism where you drive yourself down, and then on the flip side of it, overcome it. Right? If you can get that as a basic mechanism for all human beings, not your little one, she's too young yet, but she'll get there. And as a parent, by the way, you're screwed if you think you can influence it.
I've got a 16-year-old as well, so I know the answer to that.
You're screwed. You got to just let it go and love them. But anyway, if you're going to get it as a basic mechanism, you can actually get this very fundamental premise of what it is to be a human being and what it is for human beings to be human beings. Human beings are in a constant state of striving for what's next. Why? To overcome what's here. And what's here isn't good enough. So it's like a hole that can never be filled. You're constantly trying to overcome it. Sometimes people will do stuff like turn to alcohol and drugs and gambling, all kinds of shit to fill the hole, but they realize they can't fill it. And then they think there's something wrong with them. And there's nothing wrong with you. You're a human being. You just don't understand yourself enough yet.
Can I ask you a question on that then?
Yeah.
Because I interviewed Dr. Gail Brenner yesterday. She wrote a book called The End of Self-Help. And I'm thinking about this. Something she said yesterday. I'm thinking about this blank slate. Thinking about this persona. Once we realize that we've kind of created this shit and created this persona and this way of thinking and the way of being, what is the answer then? Because I've just highlighted 3 things here. Are we on a mission to kind of get back to that blank slate and start again? Are we, like Dr. Gail Brenner said yesterday, just accept who you are? Or are we trying to look at our slate now and go, okay, I want to change this about me. That's okay. I'm gonna. Where are we with it?
Well, I like what your Dr. Gail Brenner said. She sounds like a smart lady. Totally fits with my kind of existential ontologic viewpoint.
Yeah.
So I like what she said. First of all, whatever you resist is going to persist by function of your resistance. So if I relate to myself like I'm not good enough, and I keep like overcoming that and proving that I'm good enough, right? Some of your listeners, by the way, have even got a person in their mind that they're proving it to, right? Like, I'm proving it. And it's somebody they met when they were 9 and they're now 47, right? They've even got the person in mind I'm proving it to. Some of them have actually forgotten who they're proving it to. But the nature of overcoming it insists on that thing being there. It has to continue by virtue of my trying to get past it. So, you know, if you think of a human being like a space for something, and if you think of yourself, you're like an opening for something, right? And you're an opening for life to happen.
Mm-hmm.
There's something cherry picking that life. Something's like this and that's important and that's not, and I need to avoid that, and I need to. So the first step to me anyway is starting to understand what's going on with you. Fundamentally, like, what's going on with me? And not like, oh, I'm screwed, I'm broken, there's something wrong with me. No, if you just get, and I mean this to all your listeners, you are whole, complete, and perfect. Just the way you are. You are the perfect version of the you that you've become. Now, at the same time, if you kind of get it and you start to see it and the kind of typical thoughts that you have when you're most in that place, right? Or the typical physical sensations you have. And they're very typical. It might be tightness in the neck, thoughts racing, heart beating faster, when you feel like you're taking it down the way. Or the emotional state you're in, right? You'll see it's very cyclical. Even if you change the circumstances, it's the same experience. So as you start to understand it and see it, you can actually realize, and this takes a little bit of work on your part, there's a you and there's an it. That make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Right, so there's like this it, and the more you identify it, the more you see it, you're like, oh, it occupies part of the space that you are. But you've become so closely attached to it that you think that's all there is.
Yeah, I've been using this same example for the last couple of podcasts, so people might be getting bored of it, but it's really, I think it's a great metaphor for what
right.
Gary's saying. Is I've been watching this show called Legion on Netflix, and it's this mutant, you know, like the X-Men. He's a mutant like Professor Xavier, so he has psychic abilities.
Yeah.
But he has another mutant that lives in his mind, that has been there since his birth. And it wreaks havoc on his life. And it's taken him until he's now in his 30s. And he's been to so many mental hospitals and institutions and medicated because they think he's schizophrenic.
Right.
But he's not. There's this war going on in his mind between who he is and this it.
Right. Right. And what I say to my clients a lot is, I'll say, look, every day you have a choice. That, not that. Now, at the beginning, it seems like you don't have a choice. It seems like you're stuck to it. And I talk about that a little in this book and a lot in the next book that I'm currently working on. But in the book that you've got, Unfuck Yourself, I talk about if you want to go ahead and wage some kind of psychological warfare on it, you really are fucked.
Yeah.
You're screwed. It will win. There's a great book. It's called On Intelligence. And the guy talks about the brain, how the brain works. And what you need to do is acknowledge, or as your doctor said, accept that that's there. I can accept that it's there. Accept doesn't mean I'm okay with it. I'm just kind of acknowledging its presence, like it's there. And in my book, what I say is, now you got to turn your attention and actually act on something else. So I'm a big fan of the German philosopher Martin Heidegger. He wasn't the best of human beings. He was a member of the Nazi party for a while. But anyway, he was a really smart guy, though. And Heidegger said, he had this thing called Entwurf, Heidegger called it. Heidegger said, freedom for a human being is the ability to act in a concrete situation in a way that conflicts with their default self. So who you are by default, what's always there. Heidegger said freedom is the ability to act in a way that actually conflicts with that. Mm-hmm. That's the moment of freedom. Mm-hmm. So if you think about the example, like if I want to lose weight, for instance, and I'm eating a lot of pies, and I'm caught in the cycle of that, and I find myself in a certain emotional state when I eat, I'm in the cycle of my own persona. Freedom is my ability to act in another way in the moment when I'm compelled to eat the pie. Mm-hmm. Freedom for me is my ability to act. Now, that book on intelligence, this guy really describes the brain beautifully. And he said, your brain works in strings of thought. And in your brain, there are these grooved neuronal patterns. There's these grooved patterns. Those are the things that you think most. You think mostly like this, right? Mm-hmm. Like I said, you think about yourself, you think about others, and you think about life itself. He said, what you cannot do is have two thoughts at the same time.
Yeah.
Your brain, must side off, it must slip off into another neuronal pattern, right? Now, but if I try and change a neuronal pattern, if I try and make that different, I'm actually just providing evidence for it being there. I'm driving it home. I'm actually now more that than I was before by trying not to be that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to my mind is that when it comes to, I think it was the Habit Loop by Charles Duhigg, where he was saying you have this bad habit and you will never lose that bad habit, but you've just got to create a better habit and just be happy that that bad habit exists, but don't give it the time and space that you want to give it anymore. Right. But you can't. But you can't remove it from your. You can't remove it.
Right. So what if your persona was nothing more than a neuronal habit, and you actually took upon yourself expressing new ways of being? But this is the trick of what you're talking about, right? This is where people get screwed by it. You can't take on a new habit to get rid of an old one. You can't do that.
Right.
Why? Because you'll keep checking in to see if the old one's there. Therefore, checking in to that old neuronal pattern, those old brain patterns will keep getting fired up again. You can't do something to not do something else. You can only do something for the interest or the passion or the commitment to that new thing, right? So that's why people who go on diets, for instance, want to stop eating certain things. You can't get a human being to stop something. You can only get a human being to do something else.
So this runs in line with what I say to people is, if you want to quit drinking, don't focus on drinking. Right.
So what I would say to them is this what your life's about? What else do you want to make it about?
Yeah.
What do you want to make your life about? I want to make my life about this and this and this. All right, you should go ahead and do that then.
Yeah.
Fully invest yourself in that thing.
And when they do it, they're not interested in the alcohol anymore.
Right, and the byproduct of that is I'm actually not drinking, but I'm not drinking because I'm saying I'm not drinking. I'm just doing something else.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds really simplistic, but that's actually fucking how your brain works. Your brain actually works like that. The brain works look, I've had people say to me, I'm always thinking about drinking. Okay, I've heard people say this to me. No, you're fucking not. No, you're not. You might be thinking about it a lot. I get it. You're not thinking about anything all the time.
Yeah.
It's like this thought, that thought, that thought. You're having 50,000 thoughts a day, right? 80% of which you had yesterday.
It's part of the problem here, Gary, that people get themselves into such a funk and such a state of misery that they then believe they need to change themselves, but they don't even know how they work to even begin assessing it. So if this microphone broke right now, the only way I can fix it is by knowing how it works, and I don't know how it works, so I send it to a microphone repair guy.
Right. I mean, look, I started doing personal development work about 10 years ago. And somebody asked me, they wanted me to do a course, which I thought was just like, I thought it was a cult. I thought, this person's trying to get me into a freaking cult. Which was my cynicism, by the way. I found that was one of the things that I do in life. Then I was pretty cynical. Like, this is all bullshit. Right? And I found that the cynicism followed me everywhere. Right? But I did the course and I had this massive, and it was like massive awakening of what was going on with me. Like, holy shit, right? Like, holy shit, I create my own effing misery. No one's doing this to me. Right? Like, I can't believe that I'm doing this to myself. How am I doing it? Well, you are a creature of language. So, and this, I say this a lot, but how you speak, there you be. There's two kinds of talking you're doing. I say this in the book. You're talking to yourself and you're talking to others, and you're constantly doing it. What you're talking about is actively, and this neuroscience backs this up, actively and immediately in the moment impacting your emotional experience of yourself. What you're talking about, how you're talking about it. I immediately, after doing that course 10 years ago, removed certain things from my language. So one thing you'll never hear me say is, I'm trying. All right, I'm either doing it or not doing it. I stopped saying trying 10 years ago.
On that score then, Gary, because this is something that's happening for one of my community members at the moment, so it's quite interesting. When you realise that I'm trying is something that is feeding this persona, is feeding and making this monster even bigger.
Yeah.
And you say to yourself, and you recognise that, so you've reached that knowledge and that understanding, that intellect. The leap between understanding and removing it from your life is to some people like jumping over the Grand Canyon, and they give up, I think, very quickly. Is there how did you do it?
Right. First thing is, I've never tried to remove something. I've never tried to take something away. I've never tried to change anything. I've only gone about reinventing myself. So I get invested in the reinvention. The very notion, I think here's a good example for you. If you're married to someone and it's not going well, one of the first things a couple will do is what? What will they do? If it's not going well,
they're gonna argue, they're gonna defend, they're gonna attack each other, and then somewhere down the line they'll try to get help.
All right, and so they'll talk about their problems
at some point, yeah.
Right. And by the way, arguing is expressing your problem.
Yeah, it's a
right? Yeah, it's expressing a problem. The quality of your relationship is going to be determined by the amount of time you spend doing that.
Yeah, I agree.
So people think we're working on our marriage. You're probably making it worse. Now, it's not like you shouldn't work on your marriage. It just shouldn't be what your marriage is about. You should work on your marriage, and you should work on those things, and that's all great. But the vast majority of your relationship must be about what works here. What's working. And let's talk about what's working and how we could like elevate that and make that greater and better. And we got these issues, and we should talk about these and see what we can get resolved. But it needs to occupy a space of about 20% of your marriage at most. Because if it starts to creep up, the quality of your marriage will be defined in the subjects of your conversations. So if you're spending all your time talking about why you and that person don't work together, then you don't work together.
Okay, so this is why me and my wife clash a lot. Because
right.
We will have a fight. Mm-hmm. It could be over anything. And I will be thinking, right, I need to get to the bottom of this problem so it never happens again.
Right.
My wife is just thinking, oh, right, we had a fight. Right. What else great about our relationship can we now focus on? And I'm like, no, we can't focus on that. We need to fix this problem. So I generate the problems in my relationship.
Right. So it's you got to be a little two-headed. You're both kind of right. If it's a recurring thing, you might want to root that out, maybe get a little bit of help and see if you can sort that out. Mostly what people argue about in their relationship is what they themselves are incomplete about with their parents. So however you watched your parents argue or not argue, you came up with some idea about how you would handle that as an adult. And so you're trying to avoid that same shit with your wife.
Yeah.
And she might have heard a lot of negativity when she was a kid. So she's like, oh, yeah, let's focus on the good shit. No, you don't want to go down that. Do you understand?
Yeah, dude. My mum and dad never dealt with a problem. My dad never apologized. He never talked to her about problems. So I guess I just carried this and created my persona. When I get in that situation, I'm going to fucking talk about it.
Right. So you're actually a reaction to your own childhood, which means you're perpetuating the myth of your own childhood.
Gary, I'm the guy who turned around and said, I will never be like my fucking dad, and turned into my fucking dad.
Well, you've turned into your story about your dad.
A version of him.
Well, it's what you told yourself about him.
Yes.
You've turned into what you concluded about him.
Correct, yeah.
That's not him.
No.
How do I know that? He's got friends.
Yeah.
and they don't see him the way you do.
This is a good example, actually. My dad is the most boring, miserablest bastard you will ever meet in your life. When I was 16 years of age, all he wanted, his entire goal in life, Gary, was for me to go to the pub with him. That was his entire goal in life. I go to the pub with him, never talks to me. Never talks to me. Right? But he's so pleased, but he never talks to me. I talked to one of my mates who works with him. He turns around and says to me the other day, your dad is the funniest human being I've ever met in my life. I turned around and said to my dad, how can my friend say you're the funniest human being in life, yet you're the most boringest bastard I've ever met? And he said, well, I'm not at home, am I?
All right. I'm going to tell you something about you and your dad. You ready?
Go for it.
All right. You totally missed the boat with your dad. Your dad, his aim in life wasn't to get you to the pub. His aim in life was to connect with you.
I kind of knew that he was trying to connect with me in the pub. I knew that's how come? Because that's what he did with his dad.
No, because you're fucking disconnected from him.
Well, that is 100% completely true.
Right. So you never got he was reaching across the aisle to you.
Not at that time.
Right. You were too busy judging him right there.
I still, yeah.
Right. Of course you are. Everybody judges their parents.
I still do today.
Yeah, you're never going to be free until you're complete with your mom and dad. One of the things that you don't get is that your dad loves you. And I mean passionately, a profound sense of love for you that he sometimes struggles to get communicated. you got to get his beingness, what it must be like to be him. And that's the hard thing for people to get. Look, Adam, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, I think I had a pretty shitty childhood, but not terrible. Just, it was pretty tough. And my job as somebody who's used to deliver these transformational programs, I heard people who had the most horrific childhoods. And all of the blame for their adult life lay there. They looked back the way to justify the way they turned out. And what I would say to people is, you got to look back and see the human being. And you got to work hard at it. You got to really fucking think what it might have been like for them that they would do that. What the hell happened in their life that when you were a kid, they saw that as the only option they had? It's not like they didn't have other options. What they were delivering, how they were being with you when you were a kid, how your parents were being with you, was limited to the options that they had, not like cognitively, like in terms of your logic. I mean, in terms of their beingness, they were pretty limited. And the horrific thing is, and people don't get this, if you really understand, and a lot of these I led programs in Bogota, in Medellin in Colombia, in Vancouver, in Thailand, and Singapore, and London. I mean, all over the world, all over the United States. And the number of people that had been exposed to the most horrific shit would blow your mind. And what fucked them over wasn't that they saw it. It's what they concluded with what they saw. The conclusion ran through the life like an enema. The item itself lived on in their memory, not because of the item, but because of the conclusions, what they took away from it. So what I invite people to do is look back and start to get some logic to it, start to see, what is it that really happened? Not like what I concluded about what happened. Let me see if I can get it in an isolated way. That's why, by the way, do you have any siblings?
3 sisters.
Brothers?
3
Right.
sisters.
They'll all have a different version of your childhood. Some things will be the same. Some of them have a totally different experience of one of your parents than you do. That's because they didn't conclude the same shit that you did. There was a personal conclusion. So in your relationship with your dad, there's a world there waiting to happen for you, but he doesn't have a chance with you. You keep holding him to what you concluded about him. That's why other people say your dad's the funniest guy in the world, because your dad is more free to be himself around them than he is around you. Why? Because you got him in a box.
Yeah, he thinks I'm the weirdest fucking guy on planet Earth. I mean, here's the interesting thing, Gary, as you're talking about that. I give people advice to really feel what the person hurting them is going through and think what happened to them to do that, right? So I often say to people, unless they're a fucking psychopath, and the odds of that are very, very remote, right?
That's right. And they are there, but they're remote.
Then something's going on. So I tell people that all the time. And in my relationship with my wife, I'm able to do that a little bit better. But I never even think about that with my parents. Never even fucking crosses my mind.
Yeah. All right. So here's the news. I'm like the deliverer of bad news for people, right?
Well, but it's good news, Gary. I tell you why it's good news. They'll probably fucking be dead in the next 10 to 20 years. So this is good news.
Right. All right. So there was a point in your childhood with your dad. You concluded something about him and yourself, and you've got him you got to imagine this in your mind's eye. You've kind of got him down there. You're not just observing, you're looking down because he's the most boring the guy. There was a moment in your childhood, and I'm suspecting probably around 12, right? Because you can hear can hear the ontology of your statement when you said he's the most boring. That's like a 12, 13-year-old kid.
Mm-hmm.
That sentence that you've been saying about your dad, you've been saying it a long time. Right? Now, if I actually worked with you, you'd actually go back and you could see the moment you did it. But that was the point where you actually cut yourself off from your dad. You made yourself different from him. And then here's the shitty part. You started to withhold your love for him. You started to hold it back. So you've then, and everybody does this in one way or another, to whatever degree, then the love becomes something you use to manipulate the situation. So here's the other thing with you got to get about him. You're not fully free to love your father. Like fully free to just fucking gush all over that guy like for who he is and who you are and the gift of life. And Dad, I love that you are the way you are because you're my dad and that's how you are. And I wouldn't trade you in for anybody. And I've turned out and I'm a good guy. You did a good job. None of that shit's happening, right? Because you're fucking withholding it. You're withholding it. Mm. You would rather serve your appreciation and your love for another than give that to him as your gift to him as his son. And you've cheated yourself out of the love of your father. And the love of your father doesn't come from him. It comes from you.
Yeah, I don't even think about him. Here's an interesting point here. That thing that happened at that age was he forced us to move from England to Wales. So I became not only the little because I'm half Chinese, right? So not only did I become Chinky Chinaman, but I became the English cunt as well because the Welsh hate the English, right? So that was that incident. The other incident I'm curious about here is he's not my real father. And I learned that when I was about 8, when I came home and I said to my mom, "Have we have any Chinese relatives? Because people keep calling me Chinese names." And she's like, "Sit down. Your dad's not your real dad. He adopted you when you were 6 months old. Your real dad left." Is it possible, even though I don't remember any of that, and my recollection of the event was, okay, he's still my dad though, is it possible that being told at 8 that he's not your real dad somehow makes you believe as you're getting older at a subconscious level, because as you say in your book, 95% of our thoughts come from there, that I actually say he's not my real dad, so he doesn't love me?
Well, there's certainly some level of that at play. I mean, if you watch how you compensate with your daughter, right? Like the way you are with her, and the way you're kind of like connecting with her. That's the relationship you actually want with your dad, but you feel like you can't.
Yeah.
That's what you want to be. You wanted, for most people growing up, you wanted your parents to be different than the way they were. It's part of growing up to disconnect yourself from your parents because you must go off and do your own thing. So it's part of the kind of expansion of family. Like, there's a reason why you don't, and I'm saying this, most people don't live with their parents when they're 40. Some do. Yeah. But the reason why most people don't is because there must be some break. And you'll find that like people will break and then return. Some people break and never return. Some of your listeners are sitting right now like cursing their parents, saying all of this is bullshit. I'm never going to do that. Fuck them. They ruined my life. And I want your listeners to get that every time you say that to yourself, you're ruining your own life. You're fucking with yourself. It's like leaving out the rat poison and eating it yourself.
I went through a divorce and my first wife hates my guts, and I strongly believe that she's really damaged her life in a certain way by holding on to this hate rather than just saying, fuck him, he's gone. Like,
right.
Yeah,
I mean, I used to find this really common. I've coached probably anywhere between 25 and 30,000 people. And a really common phenomenon for people is that they eventually get to prove that their parents fucked their life. So everything they do subconsciously puts them further into the shit. So they pick partners that are terrible choice, like a terrible choice of partner. They spend money they don't have. They eat and drink things they fucking know they shouldn't, but I'm doing it anyway. And it all drives it down the hole. Getting complete with your parents is for you. And a lot of people won't do it because they feel like they're letting their parent off the hook. What you fail to see, by the way, if that is your point of view, is it's to get you off the hook. You're the one that's hooked. And at some point, you have to get more interested in the quality of your life than proving yourself right. And that's what it comes down to. And I mean, you know, that's a small part of a human being's existence. But those first relationships that you encountered, those are the template for every relationship you're ever going to have. That's how you see people. You see people in terms of your mom, your dad, maybe your siblings, aunts, uncles, but it's like a small handful of relationships. That's your template. That's why when you meet people, you say, oh, I took to them right away. Yeah, they reminded you of familiar traits in people from your childhood. I couldn't connect with that person. Yeah, they either reminded you of someone that you couldn't connect with back then, or you just don't know how to take them. You don't have a template for them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, the intellectual, the very intellectual guy I spoke to earlier on, now you just said that, it reminds me of when I was a kid wanting to be cool and use my charisma, so therefore the enemy becomes the smart guy or the geek.
Right. I mean, look, I'll give you an example, right? So when I left school in Glasgow, left high school, I didn't go to college. Why? By that time, I wasn't telling myself I'm not smart enough. I was just acting that way.
Yeah.
College wasn't on my radar.
Same here.
I go to college. What? I'm going to go get a job and make some money and la 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 la. Why would I fucking do that? So I successfully molded my life around it. And so I didn't often have the experience of I'm not smart enough. Why? Because I built a life where I could avoid it. Right? Mm. Now, what I did when I got into my 40s was challenge it. Like, well, what if I am smart? What if I actually am smart? What if I have a brain that if I put it to use, and I did, I put it to use, and I became a senior program director at the world's largest personal development organization. And like I said, I presented these programs all over the world to people from Harvard, MIT, the armed forces. I led transformational programs to a group of fucking Buddhist monks in Thailand. Right? Told them how to be with themselves. Showed them how to do it. You don't, guys from the East End of Glasgow, and I'm from the East End, which is like the side of the tracks where they stole the tracks. Guys from that environment don't do that sort of thing. Why? Because they can't get past their own internal sentences. Like I couldn't until I hit my late 30s, early 40s, did this transformational work, started to understand myself, started to explore myself. Like, there's more to me than this. I've become limited to this, but if I just see it for what it is, I can start the process, and it's a daily process. And I still tell myself I'm not smart enough. One of the things that I'm constantly telling myself is I'm never going to make it. Make what? I don't fucking know. I'm just never going to make it. It's constantly there. It's constantly coming back. There's that thought again. What I've become pretty facile at is acting on something else. I have the thought I'm never going to make it. I've become really good at not acting on that thought. Acting on that thought would have me give up. So I don't. I push in. I press in. And eventually, with the thing that I'm pressing in with, the I'm never going to make it gets quiet, and then it just goes away. And I just pursue. I keep going what I'm working on.
How do you... A question I know that will come up with some of the listeners on the forum in particular, because I see it posted on the forum quite regularly, is how do you... What is the work that someone needs to do to lessen the power of that negative thought that you go to. So someone wrote to me this morning and said, let me give you I'll give you an example. So yesterday, this is the person speaking on the forum, right? I get home after a 12-hour shift. I'm really tired. I come home. The kids have fucking destroyed the house. There's stuff everywhere. I'm really freaked out. I have anxiety. My husband doesn't understand me and kind of doesn't get me.
Yeah.
And you telling me that it's just in my head and I'm creating all this. And I know
you're creating anxiety.
I know it. I know I'm creating my anxiety, but I don't know how to fucking stop doing it.
Yeah, well, that's the problem. You're trying to stop doing it. The more I try and stop it, I'm actually giving it fucking plasma.
Right, which is what you said earlier on. So you said earlier on, recognize it.
Right,
okay.
See it for what it is. Yeah. Right. Now, let me use your person as an example, right? So they've connected my 12-hour shift, my kids doing what they do, and my husband doing what he does, and this state of anxiety that I've got about it. Right? Now, you're a being. You're a human being. Anxiety is a way of being anxious.
It's positive.
It's also right, but it's one of a myriad of ways of being that one could be.
Right.
Anxiety is kind of like there by default. Now, okay?
Yeah.
So you got to kind of think of this a little bit like quantum physics. By the way, all of this is based in two philosophers that I'm a fan of, Martin Heidegger and Jean-Paul Sartre. So it's very much everything I'm saying, I created it out of their work. They're the fucking geniuses. I just give it to you with a Scottish accent. So they would have said something like, Heidegger would have said, you're a miracle of being. You're a potentiality of being. That moment to moment to moment to moment, you can express that way of being, whatever way of being you actually say you are, you can actually express that in a moment of time. One of the ways to do it, because people try and muster up, then let me be happy, which is just fucking faking it. What I say to my clients is, act in a way that you would rather be. Take the actions of someone who is fulfilled, satisfied, loving, caring, understanding, compassionate. Take the actions of one of those, and very quickly you'll actually notice your way of being shifts in line with the actions. There's a Stoic philosopher, Marcus Aurelius. He said, to be courageous, one must act courageously. What he's saying there is, you don't need to get courage. You need to act courageously. That's being courageous. It's not like, and this is a simple one for me that I point to with people. You don't need courage to act. You don't need that. You need to act. Courage will come. People who have acted courageously usually were fucking terrified. They weren't like imbued with courage. Like, ha! Right? That shit wasn't happening. They were like, oh, fuck. And then they did it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? But then somebody said, that was so courageous. And they said, I literally soiled myself. I was terrified. And he said, yeah, but it was so courageous. And they say, I know, but it was terrifying. And so ways of being and acting are inextricably in a dance with each other. If you want to be, one must act. And so if you try and diminish your anxiety, stop your anxiety, work on your anxiety, then what your life becomes about is your anxiety. If you acknowledge your anxiety and you see it, and you can see it there, like, yeah, and you'll see there's certain thoughts that come with your anxiety, there's certain emotional states, there's certain physical experience of anxiety. That's right, it's all there, it's all pumping away, and your body, what you need to get is you are generating this. That's not there outside of you. How do you know that? Because not everybody in your situation would experience anxiety. Some would, some wouldn't. You're generating that. So then what? And you're actually taking the actions of someone who's anxious. So you might not be talking, you might be shouting, you might be slamming a door, you might be sitting with your head in your hands. Those are all the actions of someone who might be experiencing anxiety. I would say to you, what's a way that you would want to be? What's a way that can inspire you? What's a way like, yeah, I mean, that would be freaking cool if I could be like that. Most people flip-flop. They go, well, if I'm anxious, I should be calm. Yeah, good luck with that one. But if I'm anxious, I might take on being enthusiastic. I might take on being compassionate for my kids, or understanding of my asshole husband. I might take on being understanding of this guy right now. Let me find out what's going on, man. Let me ask him a couple of questions. Let me hold his hand and see what's going on, man. I mean, you're fucking pissed off these days. I'm here for you. What do you need? And I know that's very simplistic. I know it's not always easy in the cut and thrust of one's everyday life, but those kinds of interrupting actions start to break up your pattern for anxiety. And you're slowly starting to introduce new ways of being, new ways to be, new ways to act. You must introduce the new if you want to deal with what's here. You can't just throw your hands in the air and say, I can't get rid of what's here. No, you got to fight for the new. You got to fucking implement and do what you need to do to introduce these new ways of acting. And what will follow very quickly, your brain will follow new ways to be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I imagine as well what's coming up for me is if you take that line, then these people who live with you, who you believe are creating your anxiety and who you're blaming, will actually change with your demeanor. Because
yeah, absolutely, because you're different.
A lot of the times when we're blaming other people, it's kind of our behaviors as well, which is kind of driving some of their behaviors, which is they have to take responsibility for their own shit. But it's really difficult. Here's a good example, I guess. One of the situations I hate being in, Gary, and I'm not really good at it at all. Let's say Liza, my wife, is in a real foul mood for whatever reason. It's going to be really, it's going to be really difficult if I'm the only person in the house with her, for her to contain that on her own and not some of that not rub off on me, right? But I'm not. Yeah. I can't be in that situation. I'm not able to just say to myself, "Oh, Liza's pissed off. We'll all get pissed off. Let's just let her be pissed off." I always end up driving an argument somehow.
Yeah, you're trying to fix her, trying to get her to change.
Right, because I am uncomfortable with it. So what I'm getting at here is in the person that we just mentioned, there needs to be an awareness that our state of being will influence somebody else's state of being.
Yeah. No. Right. Let me give you this. I take a very counterintuitive approach. I actually take an approach that some people initially are fucking horrified by. Okay? My approach is, and this took me quite a while to kind of get myself here. My approach is I am 100% responsible for what's happening in my life. I start there at all times.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody makes me do shit. All right? If I'm going to get pissed off at you, I am clear, I'm doing this. Yeah. All right? You do whatever the you want. If I'm going to get pissed off, this is what I'm bringing to the table. I'm bringing pissed off, right? Or I'm bringing defensive. Or I'm bringing threatened. Or I'm bringing exasperated. I'm bringing that to the table. That's the ways of being that I'm bringing to the table. The minute that I say, you make me, I'm fucked.
Yeah.
I'm a victim now.
Yeah.
I'm being done until I'm under the weight of it. I'm screwed. Now, I'm saying, here's what I would say to your listeners. If you do use that language, if you are saying those things, keep going, but you're fucked.
Mm-hmm.
You will never get out from underneath that. You have set yourself at the bottom of the hill and you've given all the power for how you are to somebody else. You get that?
Yeah, and doesn't it work like this, Gary? So I'm just thinking about how people are thinking who are listening to this. So who are thinking, how do I change, right? So in that instance you said, what comes up for me is when you're blaming somebody else, by listening to this podcast and listening to what Gary said, something happens in you. You're like, oh, you relate to that. Then the next time you're in an argument with your other half, and you say that again, later on you might realize, oh, I fucked up there, and then you do it again. Oh, I fucked up, and then you do it again. But sooner or later, you'll stop yourself in the moment, and you'll realize, oh, this is my shit.
Like, I'm no longer going to give responsibility for my emotional state to you. Why? Because then you fucking run me. Why would I do that? Why would I say I'm only pissed off because of you? I mean, for fuck's sake, you've just turned yourself into fucking Vera Duckworth in Coronation Street or something. That's a throwback for the old schoolers there.
Coronation Street,
but you know what I mean? I've turned myself into this fucking, like I'm a victim. And by the way, the worst kind of victim I've ever come across are survivors. They're the worst kind of victim. They're still fucking perpetuating the myth. When have you survived? When's that over? I made it. I'm here. Now let me move on. Does that make sense to you?
It does. What happens?
Listen.
What happens to me is I don't.
Go ahead.
I don't say to myself consciously anyway, I'm not giving my power away to my wife. What I do say to myself is, I can't fucking exist in this relationship anymore where I'm arguing all the time because it's making us both miserable. I need to do something about it. I don't. I get to the same place, but I just think differently. I like your way of thinking better than mine.
Here's the approach I would take if I was you. I would say, if I was you and I'm in an argument with my wife, I would say, you know what? I haven't mastered my own machinery enough to interact with you about this. That's how it is. You actually haven't mastered your own machinery enough to talk to her about this.
I just run away. Like when I reach a peak that I know it's going to tip over into a place where we're both going to fall out of each other, I just get the fuck away from her as quick as I can, and it really winds her up. But as I'm trying to say to her, I'm not doing it to wind you up. I'm doing it to save us at that moment, because I know if I give myself some breathing space, I can make sense of it. Which is my logical self coming out again, right?
Of course it is, right? Let me give you something else. So here's what I would do. If I was you, I would set up a weekly 20 minutes or 30 minutes a week. And, your wife sounds like she wants to work with you on some of this stuff. Not everybody has this. They don't have a partner that's actually in the relationship.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Right. So, but you got somebody who, at some degree, still wants to do this with you, right? Which is nice when somebody still wants to do. Anyway, so I would sit down with them once a week for 20 minutes. You both get 10 minutes where you acknowledge and take responsibility for your own bullshit with no justifications and no excuses.
We actually do that. We actually do that every night.
All right, so you sit down and you say, well, today I was an angry prick. I've been blaming everybody for me being an angry prick. I've been resentful, been withholding my love. I've been somebody who, points the finger at others to explain why I'm the way I am. I'm just taking responsibility for that. Like, that's what I've been doing this week. And here's what you don't talk about, because you're a whiny bitch, and the last time you left that closet open, why can't you just close the door, right? And by the way, what you're saying to people is, I wouldn't be this pissed off if you would just close that drawer. That's not fucking true.
Yeah.
That's not true. That's domination. You'll just get pissed off at something else. Why don't you just, people say, well, they push my buttons. Well, you're the fucker with buttons. Right? Why don't you do some work on your buttons? Like, oh yeah, I got some buttons. Maybe I should. So, I mean, look, my approach with people isn't always the news that they want to hear. But what I give people is, if you want your life to work, and I mean like you want it to work, right? Life is not, and I'm saying this in quotes, perfect, right? It is, life is, right? And please don't say it is what it is, which is more like a fucking bumper sticker. Life is, right? Life is. There's a isness to it. What you have a massive say in is how you're going to be with that is. Does that communicate?
Yeah, it does, yeah.
And people live like, no, I need to change the is to change myself. So this needs to be different for me to be different. And that's not true. That's just not accurate. That's not how you work. If you actually got, like, you have a massive say in how you're going to be about something. People act like they have no say in it. They keep coughing up responsibility for how their life is, and more specifically with how they are, and they explain their shitty ways of being by pointing to others or other situations, like, well, I'm only that way because, you know, I'm only miserable because of my job. No, you're fucking not. You're being miserable about your job. Be responsible for being miserable. I get it. Your job sucks. So fucking what? What's that got to do with being miserable? You're using justification to explain your own way of being. And then you get to blame your miserable life on what's going on around you rather than who you could be. And this is the thing that kind of, you know, it's heartbreaking. Because I want people to get that they're a fucking miracle. You're a miracle. You've got a fucking Ferrari and you're rolling around like it's a broken old Vespa. And you've got a Ferrari. You've got this ability, this innate ability to switch your emotional states, your ways of being. And actually, the thing you're looking for, you're already that thing. You just have to stop. Listen, your little 6-month-old doesn't need you to make her happy.
No, I noticed that. She smiles all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, and she'll be that way until she's about 2 or 3. She doesn't, and then that's when she starts to get a sense of like that she's an identity or that she is a something, and then that identity will form. I want your listeners to get like 2 things. Getting over something is like drowning. The more you struggle with it, the quicker you'll drown. You got to calm the fuck down. You got to get like, all right, this is where I'm at. And then it's about, again, like drowning, a new action. One arm, another arm. Move my legs a little. Breathe. Right? Like start to introduce new actions into your life, new ways to act. So for your person who gets into that state of anxiety, when she goes home, that state is one of literally hundreds of thousands of potential ways she could be. That's one of them. She has a say in all of those other ones. I like to look at this a little bit like quantum physics. Being, in any moment of time, you have the potential to be any one of a myriad of ways of being. And you get an option to slip into that way of being and experience life from that vantage point. Or your default ways to be, which you already know. It's like a broken record. You know how that goes. But you have this opportunity, and it's a practice of like, I wonder what it would be like to argue with my wife lovingly. What would it be like to interact with my wife over this point with compassion? Like, what would I be saying right now to this person if who I am is compassionate? Like, what would I say? It allows me to experience them, which is what it goes back to your earlier point. They're now dealing with this compassionate person. Yeah. They're like, it doesn't fit with their default. Like, you're actually molding and shaping your interactions with people. You know, I think it was Gandhi that said, be the change you wish to see. That's it. That's actually fucking gold right there that he said. It's be who you want them to be, not to change them. But not, you can't. If your job is I'm going to change you, you're fucked.
Yeah.
No, it's the impact, the quality of your own life. Some people in life, Lee, are going to be pissed off. Some of them are going to be angry. Some of them are going to be abusive. Some of them are going to be this or that. You have a massive say in who you're going to be about that.
Yeah.
Don't just default to, well, you're that way, so I must be this way. And by the way, it's not taking the high ground. It's literally taking a stand for the quality of your own life. Do you get that?
What about the people who you work with when you tell them? Because to me, the genius here is calm the fuck down. Because once you calm the fuck down, all that fucking shit that's going on just dissipates a bit. But some people can't seem to calm the fuck down. What is your advice being to people on that?
Yeah, there's a thing called an amygdala hijack. The amygdala is like the reasoning part of your brain. I'm not a neuroscientist, but I know a number of them, and I've got Google, so I know what I'm saying is accurate. The amygdala is the part of your brain where you reason. When you're in an upset, that part of your brain like literally short circuits, so that the neuronal patterns leap over it. Mm-hmm. So they call it an amygdala hijack. So the amygdala gets hijacked, right? An amygdala hijack typically lasts about 2 minutes, but you can keep reactivating it.
Right.
Right, and you'll just keep, and you. Here's the other thing you get though: an argument only exists, or discourse only exists, to the degree that you interact with it. So the more you come at it and you say, but you don't, well, I can't, well, that's not, you're literally throwing petrol on the fire. If you want to kill the fire, you have to give it a little bit of space here to burn itself out. Right? So you actually would say something like, yeah, I totally understand that. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I get your logic. That's totally, yeah. No, I get it. I understand. Yeah, I can see that for you. Yeah, is there anything else you want to say? Yeah, I mean, you're a fucking, okay, I get it. I can see why that would be the case. Yeah, I totally get it. And it will die in front of your eyes.
It's another way of doing that, Gary. I'm just thinking of the calm the fuck down, shut the fuck up. It's
right.
You know, it like that. The whole world's going mental. Your kids are going fucking mental. Your husband's there, and your brain's dying for you to fucking say something. Just shut the fuck up and let it do its business internally.
Right.
And everyone.
Well, I'll tell you what I do. I got a practice of appreciation. So, I got 3 kids. My oldest is 11. My youngest is 2. 3 boys, and they're boys. They're like all boys. Right. It's fucking full on. Right, with these guys. And, I get like, I'm writing books. I've got people calling me. I've got, all kinds of shit flying. I'm at home all day. Mm-hmm. And, but then when I find myself getting to that point, it's like right in the back of my throat where I want to say, shut the fuck up. Right?
Yeah.
I practice appreciation.
Mm-hmm.
So it actually happened this morning, right? So I was sitting on the couch, having my coffee, and it fucking starts in my house, 6:30, it's like starts. It's like, oh, here comes the madness, they're coming down the stairs. It's like the parting of the Red Sea, and the fucking omens are coming through the gap, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sitting at the bottom of the stairs, and they're fucking biting you, and I'm pushing in the thing. And I really had this little insight, I practiced appreciation, had this little insight that these are the golden years.
Yeah.
And there'll be a time in my life when I'm an old man that I would give anything to hear them argue.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'd give anything for it.
Mm.
Because they're gone. They're doing their own thing. And then I started to get present to my life, like them in the front garden, like playing football and shouting and screaming. And I'm Dortmund. No, I'm Dortmund. And, like this whole, it's Dortmund here. Anyway, so I suddenly experienced myself being imbued with like my love for them. I'm actually moved by it right now. Like I really got the noise is fucking awesome.
Yeah.
It's awesome. The noise is awesome. There'll be a time in your life, Lee, when you'll want to see your dad be boring and you can't because he's no longer there.
Well, I have the same problem with my 16-year-old because he lives with his mum, and I think when he turned 14 maybe, he just became this independent kid who didn't need his dad anymore, and it fucking broke my heart. Yeah,
that's right. That's right. And by the way, that's your dad's experience.
I know, and my mum's. Yeah, I've said that. I've had that conversation with myself. I realised that I'm complaining at my boy that he doesn't spend time with me, and my mum, who gave birth to me when she was 18 and on her own, must be thinking, why doesn't my son spend any time with me?
Yeah, you need to go tell your mom that you love her and you turned out and she did her job with you. Set her free. Let her know you love her, and then get on the hook for generating that relationship with her. On over. But I find a practice of appreciation. Like I appreciate. It's a 3-stage thing with me. So this is in my new book. My new book's called, the working title is called The Setup. And it's how you set yourself up in life to fail. And you do it over and over and over and over and over and over and over.
Yeah.
And the way to, and I explain it in depth in the book, but the way to interrupt the setup, because it's a cycle, and once you're in it, you're fucked. Way to get out of it, way to break out of it, is to practice appreciation. It's 3 tiers of appreciation. So it's either appreciation for the person in front of you, and sometimes you really got to work hard at that because they're an asshole, right? And they're currently being an asshole with you. And the people in your life are going to be an asshole with you. How do you know that? Because you're an asshole with them. That's how you know they'll be being an asshole with you, because you do too. Don't pretend you're not. You get straight with yourself about the way you are. So you practice appreciation with that person. So you would point to, either vocally or with yourself, either right out front to them or with yourself, what you actually do appreciate about that person. So that'll break the pattern right there in the moment.
Yeah.
The second tier, which is what I did today, is appreciating this situation. So where I'm at, right? Like right now. And I took it to the third tier, which is when I appreciated my existence. That I get to live this life and do this. And I don't care how shitty it is for your, I do care how shitty it is for your listeners, but I want them to get, there are people in the world who would give a limb for your life. And they would give a limb for your life to get a shot at it. Because their life is really fucked. And I mean like fucked. I mean, I coached a kid, this is about 6 or 7 years ago, through the after effects of a genocide, and watching his mother being raped and then his father being raped by about 20 men. And he was standing there, himself only 19, telling me that he was over it and he was okay now. And I knew this kid's fucked. He's fucked. And I got him at the other side of it. It took something, but I got him at the other side of it. It was one of the most amazing moments in my career, actually, because he saw it, he could see it, and he ended up with this really like a massive opening for being. And it was like fucking sunshine just gushed out this kid's eyeballs. I mean, it was, it was a moving, one of those moments where you realize it's all worthwhile, So I want your listeners to get, like, as fucked as it is, there are people who would want your shot now, right? They would take your life today with your past, and they would rather take a swing at your life than their own. And you got to keep realizing that as a human being, like, you always have a shot. It's never too much. The only thing that's in the way is you haven't discovered or you haven't uncovered for yourself how to break out yet. that doesn't mean you can't break out. It just means you haven't discovered yet how to break out. But if you push in, if you press in, you will. There's more to you. I keep saying this, man. You're a fucking miracle of being. You need to do the work, do the programs, read the books, listen to the podcasts, think, and then make it real for yourself. Bring it into your real life. Don't hold it in your head like a fucking concept.
Do work.
Get it in real life. You know, take the actions. Try it out. Like, all right, you know, I need to break up the I mean, I knew someone, and this works awesome, by the way. One of the ways they broke up the bullshit in their house is they rearranged the fucking furniture. Everybody's brain patterns were different. Why is the fucking couch there? And they totally like interrupted the shit. I mean, I know that sounds really simplistic. That stuff really works.
Yeah.
The brain is in a cycle. It's caught in a trap, as Elvis would have said. So, you know, you want to look for ways to intervene with those cycles. And, you know, read my book, but don't just read the fucking book. Read the book and fucking do what it says. Do the book. Don't read it. Fucking do it. If you do my book, I'm telling you could change massive aspects of your life. I'm not saying that with any arrogance. I'm not a guy in the corner of McDonald's. Just, you know, I've got a lot of expertise in the area of people changing their lives.
Yeah.
And the book is there to be done, not to be read. And if you actually do it, you will change this element, that element, this element, that element, until you start to see like your life is more about the new than the old. And that, my friends, is really about, that's what it takes to build a new future for yourself.
Yeah, and understand that it takes time. Gary, I thought your book was amazing.
Thank you.
When my wife got it for me for Christmas, she said, I'm not quite sure whether you'll like this one or not. And I read a lot. And the more you probably get the same problem, the more you read, the less fucking wow moments you get when you read a book, right? You even get to the point, you read the first chapter, you think, right, next.
Done.
I loved it. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. And after speaking to you for 90 minutes, I'm even more impressed, Gary. And I just want to end by just saying thank you for writing the book, writing the next one, which I will be pouring all over, and for giving your life basically to coach 30,000 people. And I really appreciate that, and thank you for joining us on the podcast.
You're absolutely welcome. And I just want to say, you know, like people like what you and what you're doing out there, giving of yourself to make a difference for people, actually makes the world a little better. It's a little better place. People can catch up with me on Facebook. I give a lot of free stuff away, quotes, blog pieces to support people. You can find me on Twitter, Gary John Bishop. You can find me on Instagram, Gary John Bishop. You can go to my website, garyjohnbishop.com. And I'm in the final negotiations right now, actually, with a few major publishing houses who want to pick up Unfuck Yourself. And, you know, because the book is sold almost 30,000 copies.
Yeah, it's an Amazon bestseller, right?
Right. And for a bestseller, for an Amazon self-published self-help book, mostly they sell like 2,000 or 3,000 copies, and those are the good ones. So it's gone crazy. And then the next book that I'm doing, and the one after that, which is going to be all about marriage. But you know, if people catch up with me, they'll see, you know, that I'm constantly giving away free things. I want people to live better lives. I want people to break out of their stuff, because it's not complex. It's simple, but it's not easy. Yeah. But it is simple. You got to stop trying to make it complex. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to share my stuff with your people. It's just great.
Yeah, I'll stick all those links on the show notes, Gary. I agree with you. It is simple. It's simple because it's who we are, and we were wired. That's right. We were wired to win. So until next time, thank you very much. Was that okay?
Thank you, Lee. Thanks.